All right, can you please tell me about this picture?
Yes, that's my great-grandfather, Jonathan Kittler. He was born in Alt-Arsis, South Russia. He and his wife, my great-grandmother, Frederica, was born Grum, Gramm, left South Russia to come to the U.S. She, en route, got ill. They were in Germany for a period of time. She ended up passing away there and is buried there, but he did settle in Mercer County, rural Golden Valley, North Dakota.
All right. Did you ever hear any other stories about their immigration?
Other than the fact that she had gotten ill, and his three daughters stayed with their parents in Germany. After my great-grandmother's death is when they decided to leave and come over here. She's buried in Germany. My grandpa Kittler and his two brothers came over also. They all settled here.
Right. Do you know what year he was born?
No, I don't have the year of his birth
Okay.
on here at all. No.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
This one.
That's my great-grandfather, Jonathan Kittler, when he passed away. I don't remember what year that was either, but he is buried in rural Dodge, North Dakota's St. Paul's Lutheran Cemetery.
Did he die before you were born?
Yes.
All right.
This is the old stone house that was on my grandpa John Kittler's farm that was north of Golden Valley, North Dakota. The home was built by my grandfather John, my dad John, and my great-grandfather, Jonathan. There isn't much of the house standing any longer. The gentleman standing next to the lady,
You can go ahead
oh,
and point.
can it, right here, that's Jonathan.
Okay.
It's my great-grandfather. The other people, I have no clue.
Right. How did they go about building this house? Do you know?
Just got all the stones from there out in the fields. And they made whatever, it was like a mud plaster, and that's how they constructed their home.
Right.
And it was very warm during the winter and cool during the summer, as I was told, the home. Also didn't have any indoor plumbing. We don't have a picture of the outhouse.
Right.
Okay. This is my great-grandfather on the day of his funeral, and that's all of his children standing there. My grandfather is the one right here, Jonathan.
And what year was this? Do you know? Don't know?
I don't have much on there.
That's just fine.
But on the sheet I gave you for my great-grandmother, it lists what year she had died on there.
Okay.
Be his wife. This is my grandpa and grandma John and Magdalena Kittler and two of their daughters. This was very likely taken at their farm north of Golden Valley. My grandmother died at a very early age. I believe it was 1944 or 45. And my dad and his siblings were quite older. They were older. They were teenagers in early 20s when their mother passed away. And they remained on the farm north of Golden Valley until 1947 when my grandfather moved off the farm.
Did you get to know them very well?
I knew my grandfather. My grandmother was no longer living by the time I was born.
Can you tell me what your grandfather was like?
He was tall, very religious. He ruled with an iron hand. I was about 11 years old when he passed away. The last thing that I remember getting from him is he bought me my own Bible with my name engraved in front. Before I was just like a couple months before he passed away. But I really didn't get to know him as well as the other set of grandparents from my mom's side.
All right. And can you tell me the names of the girls?
Yep, that's Amelia, and this one is Elsie.
Okay. Did you know them very well?
Yes, they were very nice ladies. It was my dad, and he had 3 sisters that were alive, and his 2 brothers died in infancy.
Did they live close to you while you were growing up?
No. One lived in Jamestown, and one was out in Glendive, Montana.
All right.
These are my other set of my great grandparents from my mother's side. That's Daniel and Christina Shimke. That's my grandmother Lydia Brunmeyer and her brother Fred Shimke. There's an article about them when they had moved over to Mercer County, and some of the hardships that they encountered. But they also bonded with many of their friends and neighbors that migrated from Russia at the same time. And a lot of them settled in the same area, and that's north of Hazen, what's known as the Krem area.
Did you ever hear any stories about their immigration?
No, other than they went through a lot of pain to leave Russia because they were comfortable with their environment, but they could not live under the Tsar or whatever it was that was there at the time. They just couldn't, and they had to move here. They struggled for the first year really bad. And in that article that you were given, it states that they would go out and they would pick up buffalo bones, and with a team of horses, it took them a day or so to get from Hazen over to New Salem, and they would sell loads of buffalo bones, and that's what they lived on the first year. The story that I've heard about my great-grandfather, they had 2 or 3 years where they were hailed out in crops, and one spring he prayed and said that if the good Lord allows him to have a crop that year, for the rest of his life he will fast on Good Friday, and he did. He had a nice crop, and he fasted for the remainder of his life on Good Friday. It's a promise he kept.
So this was also a fairly religious family.
Yes, yes, very much so.
Do you know any other stories
About them? No. One thing with my grandparents, with this set of my grandparents here, with this Lydia, everything was hush-hush. A lot of the stories just were never told.
Okay.
Okay. This is the Daniel Shimke family in later life. This is my great-grandfather Daniel Shimke, his wife Christina. These are my grandparents, Chris and Lydia Brunmeyer. That's a daughter to them. And this is my grandmother's brother, Fred Shimke, was not married at the time this family photo was taken. And this is their other daughter, that's Herman and Teresa Meyer. So the Daniel Shimkes had 3 children.
Okay.
And they farmed also in the Krem area also, or the Shimkes, and so did my grandparents.
Can you tell me a little bit about your grandparents?
Grandparents, they farmed all their life. They were hardworking people, very God-fearing people. They had 9 children. They had total 2 different personalities. My grandmother was the disciplinarian. My grandfather was very easygoing. Grandma, with all of us grandkids, would always, it was understood that when you were much younger that you were to be seen and not heard. We all had to toe the line. When we became teenagers is when we really got to know them, because they were able to converse. And it was always in German only. Even though they could speak and understand English, you did nothing but talk German.
Right. Did you know any of these when you were growing up?
No, no. These 2 lived in Garrison, and he had passed away at an early age, right? So.
All right.
Okay. And that is my great-grandfather, Daniel Shimke, in the day of his funeral. And I don't have his death date on there. But Daniel migrated from Eigenheim, South Russia. And he landed in America on December 1st, 1885. Oh, in May 1885. And I never got to know those people either. My mother she did know him, but not for very long. So it's been a while since he passed away. Let me just look. Oh, okay, here it is. Daniel Shimke was born February 9th, 1863, and he died October 18th, 1934.
Do you know how much of his family he emigrated with? Did he bring his parents with?
No, his parents did not come along. They are over, I would imagine, over in Eigenheim somewhere. As far as any siblings, there may have been 2 of them, but I don't know where they're located. They were both sisters. Lots of cousins from his were living between here and Harvey, North Dakota.
Right.
Okay. And these are my grandparents, Christ and Lydia Brunmeyer. My grandpa was born in Butte, Nebraska in 1887. But his father, Philip, and his mother, Elsie, migrated from Worms, South Russia. And both of Grandpa and Grandma are buried in Hazen. My grandmother was born near Krem, North Dakota, and that was in 1892 is when she was born.
Okay.
But my grandparents from my grandpa's side, or my great-grandparents, they're both buried in Mercer County. We know where my great-grandmother Brunmeyer is buried. It's an old country cemetery that you can't get to with a vehicle. But there's a little bit of nobody knows where my great-grandpa Philip's buried. They're either saying Peace Lutheran in Hazen, which they have no records, and the other cemetery where my great-grandmother's buried, church had a fire and records are destroyed. So he's in Mercer County, that's all I know.
All right. How far away did your grandparents live while you were growing up?
They lived right in Hazen. We spent all holidays with them. Birthdays were a big thing. Family gatherings, it was.
Can you describe some big family gatherings?
Every Christmas or Christmas, Thanksgiving, you know, when you have 9 children, and I remember their home being packed with a lot of people. Grandma did all the cooking for dinner and supper. There was just a lot of activity continue, you know, just all the time. Birthdays with this side of the family was very important. Get together for the day and just have an all-day birthday party. Just eat and eat until you can't eat anymore. It was just a fun time.
What was traditional to do for birthdays?
Just get together to eat and make sure there was enough cake and ice cream. Everybody brought cakes and ice cream, and generally what they did when there was any birthday party was always like sandwiches and your different potato salads and Jello. Jello was a big staple with them. And then like at Christmas, my grandmother made about every kind of candy you can about imagine. It was just another day of just sitting, visiting, and eating. And
do you remember what kind of candies there were?
oh, she had her divinity and fudge and I don't know, they're chocolate covered peanuts. She bought very little candy and made tons of cookies, like the pfeffernuss cookies and things along that order. And you never had a meal at their home. My grandpa made very good wine. And that, I don't care if you were 6 years old, you got a glass of wine. I remember I couldn't stand wine. And after I would drink it, my face would get flushed. But we all got it. And I'm looking for a little red rooster glass one because they had a bunch of those, and that they just filled it up, and everybody had to have a glass of wine.
Do you remember how he made wine?
He had a wine barrel, you know, with a stopper in there, and I don't know how he made it. I never watched him, but there was always wine. Rhubarb wine, chokecherry wine, grape.
Right.
It had a good taste, but I just didn't like it.
Did you ever stay overnight with them while you were growing up?
Only once, but I don't know. It was when my brother was born. They dropped me off there, but I don't remember staying overnight there other than that time. But I have my grandmother's wedding gown that she's wearing. I don't have the veil. I was down at her house after my grandfather had passed away, and she cleaned out her old trunk, and she was going to throw this, and I said, absolutely not. So I brought home her wedding. It's very fragile. It's sealed and it's put away.
Are there any other memories of your grandparents you'd like to share with us?
They were very church-fearing people, God-fearing people. I mean, my grandfather held many offices in his church. My grandmother never went to church unless she wore a hat. And then they had an unfortunate incident with the church where they went to at the time, out St. Paul's Lutheran, that's north of Stanton, where the pastor had, I don't know if you guys have ever told this story, but the pastor there had gotten one of his confirmation students pregnant. And the pastor's wife was not there at the time. And he drugged this girl, laid her in front of the altar, and set the church on fire. I have articles downstairs somewhere of this, what happened. But my grandparents, to their dying day, claimed their pastor was innocent. Because a pastor would never, ever do something like that. And we felt really quite fortunate because when this pastor was out trying to get one of these young girls from the church to clean, he came to my grandparents' farm and wanted my mother to come there. And my grandfather said, no, she's staying home to work. And they always said, thank goodness that they didn't allow that to happen, because that could have been my mother. But they had talked about it many times. They said he never did it, but it was proven. It was a proven fact.
Right. Anything else you'd like to share about your grandparents?
They weren't over talkative in a large group of people. They could sit and listen and laugh and whatever and say they had the best time ever. But I was very fortunate to live as close as I was to them and get to know them.
All right.
Okay? Those are my parents, John and Edna Kittler. Mom was born in Krem, North Dakota. My dad, North Golden Valley. Those days you were born at your home with a midwife. They started out living on the Kittler family homestead for about 1 year. Then they moved to Beulah. Dad worked construction all his life. Worked for the railroad for the last few years of his life. Mom was just a homemaker. I have one brother, that's all that's in our family. They were hard-working people. Mom canned everything possible. There wasn't a whole lot of money to go to the store and buy a lot of things, so we always had huge gardens, as did my grandparents as well. And Mom did a lot of canning. In those days, we ate a lot of German dishes made with flour, and so that was, you bought 100 pounds of flour, and that lasted you a while. But we went through a period when my dad wasn't working, and so the flour and with all these dough dishes and old chickens were our staple for several months out of the year. But I grew up in Beulah, and we were all here. Mom and Dad are both buried out here at the Beulah Cemetery. I remember we never went to English church services. It was always German until I started confirmation. And then I was forced to go to English church, and it was just odd. It was a total different service and whatever. And in the German services, the men sat on the right side of the church and the women and the kids on the left until you got a little older. Then you got to sit with your dad if you were a boy. And when we started going to English services, families sat together. And so we got in the habit of doing that. And when we'd go to German service, we did the same thing, and these little old grandmas didn't have a sense of humor. They didn't think that was proper. You were not to do that. But, yeah, we got by with very little. But we weren't the only family there were a lot in those days.
Can you describe your relationship with your father?
He was, again, more easygoing. My mom was the disciplinary person. He would not take life quite so serious. He liked to joke. And he had no problem. He loved to visit. He was where my mom wasn't that way, So We got along well. And his later years in life, when he got really ill and was forced into a home, is probably when we got our closest, when he was there.
All right. Can you describe your relationship to your mother?
Okay, she was the disciplinarian. I remember one incident where I'd gone to visit some neighbors, and I was quite young then. I was probably 6 or 7. And I do remember that time. And those kids were going to the movie and want to know if I wanted to go with, and I said yes, never bothered to ask. And so my mother finally found where I was at, got me out of the theater, and 2 blocks home, I got it with a stick. So I remember that. She was the miser, in her younger years, not spend unless you absolutely need it. Or dad would be a little bit more free with his money. And that. She loved to garden. And they were probably, I'd say about 1966, 67, somewhere in there, where they finally got their first home with hot and cold running water and indoor plumbing. No longer heating up the water for the weekly Saturday night baths and sit in a galvanized tub. That was not fun. But that's what we had. And we've always lived in town, but the area where I lived, there were many people in the same boat down there.
Right. Which one of your parents would you say influenced your life more?
My dad, as far as being more outgoing and visiting, I'm more like my father. My mother is, let's get by with a little bit less. But that changes when you get older too.
What kinds of things did your parents do for pastimes?
Back then, when I was growing up, we did a lot of visiting. That's really basically their path, And we, as kids, weren't given a choice. When you went to visit, you went along. That was it. There was nothing else. That was primarily it. They weren't dancing people, so they would work and then visit. That was their highlight of their life. And again, on my mom's side, the birthday thing. You celebrated everybody's birthday. That was the big thing. We got together. And that's something that no one does anymore.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your parents?
Other than the joy of their life was when they became grandparents. That was wonderful. Mom did an awful lot of canning also. And I guess that's something that's carried on to us because my wife grew up in the same environment and we still do a lot of canning. Vegetables and meat. Something we still do.